All right, the recording has started. Welcome everybody to the CIP meeting in February. We are not physically at UTSA, but remember this is hosted by UTSA, the Center for Advanced Manufacturing and Lean Systems. Today, I'm very happy to bring you a great speaker, Mr. John Knotts, who has been a longtime supporter of the CIP meetings, and probably many of you also know that Mr. John Knotts is one of the founders of CIP meetings, started with Mr. Jerry Berlenga. And he has a lot of experiences in process improvement, business excellence, and so on. And today, I think the topic is very, very interesting. He's going to tell us about the business world after COVID-19. Earlier, I was discussing with John. I said that hopefully we're getting to near the end of COVID-19 now, but he said maybe not. So we'll get the story from him, and let's welcome John.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Wan, members, guests of the Continuous Improvement Professionals Forum. Today, what I'd like to talk about is the business world after COVID-19. So what is it going to look like after this is all over with? So in July of 2020, after about 4 months of writing and editing, I published Business 2020, the business world after COVID-19. You can request a free copy at this website on the screen, and also I just sent it in the chat. So if you want a copy of that free PDF, I made that available to as many businesses as possible based off the stuff that I was seeing in business. I knew the landscape was changing and I wanted businesses to be prepared for it. So some of the things that I saw was that we can definitely expect a need for more transparency and trust in our leaders. Demands are going to be placed on these leaders to respond in a totally different fashion to future situations like this. What I think is really important to a lot of the people that are on this call and in this room is the need for organizations to scale up quickly as we come out of this. And I'll talk about why. We're going to see a big jump in the need for disaster risk and contingency planning in the business world. There's going to be a strong need for the establishment of remote ready processes. Obviously, from the whole work at home world, that was a challenge. And we'll be discussing that work at home world, the new normal that we have to deal with. One of my favorite topics is knowledge management and really being able to control, some people call it information management, but being able to control that. And this pandemic has really brought that to light for a lot of businesses. A lot of businesses, and this is probably the favorite piece of what I have discovered, are looking for ways to provide innovative value for their customers. A major challenge, and things are just changing every day. And then the last thing is an emphasis on change readiness over change management. And we'll talk about that a little bit more as well. Because of the way that I saw businesses around the world changing, I identified 7 key areas that I felt that businesses really needed to care about. And this led me to working on a global book called Post-COVID-19, Global Perspectives and Insights for Business Response. And this was made up of authors from all around the world. And we put this thing together in about a month. And it was about the same time that I was writing Business 2020. Then out of that, I was invited to join the Global Business Playbook, where I've been writing with them for 8 months and I operate as their strategist. In April of 2020, I published an article on Forbes that was titled Leadership and Trust After Crisis. And I identified how this pandemic has been the crucible for leaders around the globe. Like the coronavirus, no one has been immune. So some of the lessons that I discovered through this is that leaders need to not be the victim. They need to look at the problem that they're facing as an opportunity and move themselves into the role of a creator versus a victim. The second thing was that they need to really focus on emotional intelligence, controlling their emotions, understanding, being self aware and self managing, because just like the employees, this affected leadership hard, and they didn't know what to do. They got this whole company that they're responsible for, and that caused a lot of leaders to go into their offices, shut their doors, and really worry about what was going on without communicating. And that leads me to the next thing that I saw was that we're going to need leaders in the future to really lead with transparency. See, a lot of leaders didn't talk about what was going on. They didn't share things with their people. And when you don't share anything, people will come up with their own stories. The rumors are going to start. So it'll be very important for leaders in the future to lead with transparency. And the last thing that I saw was the need for decisive leadership. We don't always have the answer to the questions that we're faced with, especially in this pandemic. And I was talking to Dr. Wan about this, about how even, as we went into this, most people thought, oh, this will be 2 or 3 months and then it'll be over. And then 2 or 3 months went by, and suddenly it's like, well, I'm hoping somebody does something about this. And it wasn't really until about maybe November where businesses started thinking about, maybe we're in this for the long haul, and I need to figure out some way to do something about this because my company's not going to survive. So leaders are learning that they need to be decisive, and they need to make decisions even when they don't have all the answers, and stick to them until they figure out that that's just a bad decision. But they need to move forward because that's what their people are looking for. This one is probably really important to a lot of people here, because the second thing that I saw was how businesses around the world were struggling and folding, closing up shop. I knew that when the dust settled, those businesses that were actually left behind and were able to keep themselves going, that didn't go bankrupt or just close, they would have to scale up, or they will have to scale up their operations very quickly. Here in San Antonio, over 500 restaurants have gone out of business. 500 restaurants. Think about that. So what about all those restaurants that are left? And I've seen major change. Subway has closed a whole bunch of their locations around town. And that's a major change to the way things are going to be done. So as we come out of this pandemic and things start opening up, these businesses are going to be even more busier because people are going to come to them that has never been to them before. They're going to have a new customer base, basically. So I think it's going to be really important for a couple of things to happen here. One, the businesses really need to understand how their processes work today and what kind of things are going to be stressed on it. If they use scenario planning and really look at the challenges that they're going to be faced with as these things grow, they'll find out that this is going to be a really costly thing all of a sudden. So where do they get the funding? Where, if you've been through this pandemic now for a year, your cash flow is tight, and all of a sudden you've got to increase business exponentially. How do you do that if you don't have the cash flow to be able to help that? And that can cause a lot of businesses to fail at the outset, because then what you get is bad customer service, bad product delivery, lots of defects in your product. That is not good for business, and it can cause the business to fail. Also, there's going to be an increased emphasis on technology. Again, another cost that businesses are going to have to focus on, because more and more the customer is expecting technology. And lastly, there's going to be this massive hiring crunch. And I know right now there are businesses right next door to where I live. I'm out here in a horse ranch out in Bulverde, And right next door, we have Tejas Rodeo, which they have a steakhouse. And last weekend, they had a sign out in front of their door that they were closed because they couldn't get enough people to staff their restaurant. Now, their restaurant's very small, so we're talking like maybe 5 people, but they're having staffing challenges now just trying to stay open. And you think about the cost of getting these new employees very quickly and then onboarding them fast with the technology and with the skills to be able to deliver to their customers. Major challenges that we're going to see in businesses coming up. The next thing I realized was how important people think disaster risk and contingency planning is for business, especially now. Because many people have told me there is no way you could have planned for a pandemic. But I'm going to tell you this right now, I totally disagree with that. And the reason why I say that, and some of you may not agree, but let me share this. My wife and I bought a horse farm 5 years ago, 100 acres. And when we closed on the 6th of May, or the 6th of May, the week after that, it started raining here. And as you know, in San Antonio, when it rains, it rains. And we found out just how much flooding occurs around us. And we were literally landlocked on our farm because we couldn't get to anything. We couldn't get to gas stations. We couldn't get to restaurants. We couldn't get to the grocery store. We couldn't get to anything. Then that winter, we had a really rough winter for San Antonio, not like the winter that we've had this year. And we had temperatures that dropped into the freezing temps. When it freezes on a farm that's 100 acres and you have pipe and hoses running everywhere, basically this turns into a swimming pool because everything breaks. So we discovered some things that definitely could go wrong on this farm. We sat down and we built a disaster preparedness plan. And we looked at all the things that could possibly happen. Now, we didn't plan for the pandemic, but what happened was we created 2 checklists off the 2 things that happened the most. That was the rain and flooding and the freezing temperatures, the breaking of pipes. So we built these checklists to be able to respond when we saw something coming. When we saw this coming, and literally I was having a conversation with Tim Handren, who's the CEO for Santikos Theaters, and he was telling me, I don't think I could have ever prepared for a pandemic owning a theater. That was in January. And I walked out to the car because I had no idea what he was talking about, and I Googled it on my phone. When I realized what the problem was, I came home and I said, honey, we need to look at this. We broke out our checklists and we ran both of those and looked at what was on there, and we pulled out the things that we knew we needed to do in case this was a major problem, which it became. Now, I will tell you that we were a little bit over prepared because we actually thought that there might be a run on banks. We had no idea there would be a run on toilet paper. And we thought that there was going to be a big gas shortage. So we did actually prepare for those 2 instances along with everything else. The farm came through with flying colors. We have more business here than we've ever had, but we were able to remain open and do it smartly and do it safely. And that is because we had a plan. We were prepared before they ever said everybody has to work at home, even before it actually had become a thing in the United States. So I will tell you that we're going to see this need for businesses to look at planning, and there's definitely the opportunity for them to say, well, what happens if my building were to burn down completely? What am I going to do? I'm on a business for about 6 months to maybe 2 years, depending on the size of that building. What if the government changes their rules around what I do and I'm out of business? So it might be some what if stuff, and maybe you don't necessarily have a checklist put up for that because it's not likely to happen. But the things that you have done in your planning can help you actually do this. And there's no time like the present to look at disaster and say, what can we do now? And that has helped several businesses when this all kicked off. Of course, we're all seeing this now. Everyone is virtual. And a lot of people actually are beginning to like this, but there are a lot that actually hate it. Personally, I miss the face to face. I get a whole lot more work with people when I'm actually seeing them face to face versus a virtual environment where I'm staring at a camera and not staring at a person. But we're learning how to adapt, right? And I actually believe that this challenge wasn't going to last long. But as this pandemic has stayed with us, I've realized that now I'm wrong because businesses are starting to do away with their headquarters. They're already pushing work from home into the fall of this year and maybe even into next year. And some businesses are like, we're not even going to go back to working in a building anymore. It's not worth it. In November of 2020, I published another article with Forbes that was called The New Normal: Leading Virtual Organizations. So here's one of the major challenges that I think businesses were faced with when they went to work from home. We've spent years and years teaching people how to manage remote employees and virtual teams. Manage teams. But leading an organization is a completely different challenge, something that these CEOs, presidents, and owners have no idea how to do. They're used to walking down the hall and talking to somebody on their executive staff. They're used to walking amongst the staff and talking to people and getting things done. Today, they've got to deal with technology that they've never had to work with. They have to figure out how to motivate an entire organization. It's such a challenge. The other thing that hit when everybody had to go work from home is that we didn't have processes in these organizations that were actually designed to facilitate working from home, not the entire organization. And when that happened, that impacted businesses across the spectrum. Now, I already said that knowledge management is one of the things that I really like to focus on in organizations. Now more than ever, companies have found that knowledge management or information management has become paramount to their business. Why? Because mainly of two things. One, the employees are working remotely. So they don't have access to the paper files that they used to that were in a file desk down the hall or in a file room. They have to get this stuff electronically. And a lot of organizations don't have it that way, or at least not everything. And the second problem that businesses faced was they were laid off employees or furloughed them very quickly. And when you do something like that, all of that stuff that's stuck up here in the head is gone. A lot of businesses discovered people are storing stuff on their computers and their hard drives. Their file systems for their online cloud storage is completely messed up. They can't find anything from people that left. So the problem was that the filing systems were so disorganized and extremely hard to find information that when people initially went to work from home, they couldn't get their work done. They couldn't even find information. So this became a huge challenge and something that businesses still have not been able to solve to. They need to really focus on knowledge management and information management in the future. Now, this is the one that I really love because this has been the most interesting of changes that have impacted the business world. Early in the pandemic, I knew that businesses were going to need to get innovative if they hope to stay in business. So let's face it, this is about meeting the customer expectation. So when Amazon came around, Amazon changed the world for a lot of different businesses because everybody expected the Amazon delivery experience. Everybody expected to be able to order something and get it in 2 days at their doorstep, no matter what it was. I know because I do a lot of shopping on Amazon. But now think about the expectations that are changing today and how maybe your behaviors have changed. So I don't know how many people here actually shop at HEB, but I do. And I haven't walked in an HEB in 4 months. I have not stepped foot in an HEB in 4 months. Why? Because I get on the app and I order my groceries. Actually, I load up them in my cart as I'm using stuff and I know I need it. I plan my pickup. I drive up, I enter a code I text them my code. I pop the trunk. I don't get out. They just say, "How you doing, Mr. Knotts?" and put it in the trunk. Close the trunk, wave at me, and I'm gone. Everything is no muss, no fuss. So this is the world that we live in. I'll give you a little story. So I love Buffalo Wild Wings. And Buffalo Wild Wings has online, you can order. You can place all of your order. I order from Buffalo Wild Wings. And I pull up and I realize I got to go in and pick it up. Well, what the heck is wrong with that? You see, this is customer behavior. And I actually recognized that I had to get out of my car and I had to go inside. I had to put on my mask and be all frustrated because they weren't meeting my expectation. I haven't been back to Buffalo Wild Wings since then. Now think about that. So innovation in the way that you deliver your services, whether it be curbside pickup or home delivery, being really innovative, and how can you do that? The other thing that I've seen from an innovation standpoint is the businesses, you're going to see this. Businesses are increasing their recurring revenue models. One of my clients is a wine bar right here in Bulverde Village. And she bought the wine bar in February from another owner, changed the name, and then a month later, her wine bar was shut down for 4 months. The only reason she was able to stay open is because there was also a wine club involved with that, with 330 slots. Now, she lost some wine club members over this. She was down about 100 wine club members by the time we were finally able to reopen the doors. But that recurring revenue every month was what kept her business open. She still had money coming in to be able to maintain the minimum staff, the operations manager, to be able to keep the lights on, to be able to maintain the stock. She was able to do that. And then by providing, curbside pickup and some, other ways to do business, she was able to stay open. If she didn't have that, she wouldn't exist today. She would have been out of business right after she bought it. So you're going to see this innovations. You got to be looking for ways to innovate with businesses. In 2015, I shared a presentation with this audience, and it was called Ready, Set, Change. I talked about the need for businesses to move away from simply managing change and to embrace a model of change readiness. Now, many of those companies that were still in the change management world, they were reacting to this change, are no longer exist today because they just weren't prepared. And you couldn't manage how quickly this happened and how impactful it was. This honestly was the business clarion call. Change readiness is most important for organizations today. So I know that I'm talking about a lot of things that businesses are struggling with, but I'm proud to say that there have been many business success stories over the last year. Companies that were able to pivot, we'll use those words, or reinvent themselves, they've been able to succeed. Leaders that proved their abilities and kept their company together, even some leaders you've seen in the news where they didn't even take a paycheck for an entire year so that they could keep all of their employees on board. I personally know many of these leaders that have gutted it out and been able to keep their doors open through this. And business that have been able to adapt and adjust to this new normal, whether it's working at home or these changing customer behaviors because of the pandemic. There are a lot of success stories out there, and I'm always looking for more of them. So Dr. Juan, members and guests of the Continuous Improvement Professionals Forum, my question to you now, open for discussion, is what do you see in 2021? What do you think?
Hey, John, this is Liz Reyes with Veracast. Great discussion. I think it is becoming more of a reality where leaders are now looking at that futuristic and not to be more with sounding like technology, but how does that look like defining with groups, right? Because you're right, a lot of times work was being able to be completed by doing walk-ups, planning. How does that look like now from home, right? And you're going to be competing with a lot of businesses that are going to be offering that because it may work for someone else's lifestyle. And then you don't want to lose the knowledge, the passion for the work because of something like this. So I think those are the types of things you have to look at, focus on in 21 is how do you continue to adapt and be flexible and focus on the end goal? Because if the work is being produced, it shouldn't be causing oversight to that end goal.
Yeah, so it's a great point, Liz. There's a company that I recently have been talking to and I'm partnering with them, and they're called Better Than Unicorns. So you can check them out. But one of the things, obviously, this is our world, right? So we're all, it's faces on a screen. Some of us have our cameras on and some of us don't. But this is the environment that we're in. It's very flat and we're not able to connect with people. So Better Than Unicorns is actually getting into this immersive technology using the Oculus on your phone, and recreate virtual reality team building and training sessions. So you're going to see technology like this exploding on the scene. I've been to many conferences where they have these breakout rooms where you go and you find a table and you sit down and there's 3 or 4 people at the table and you talk to them, or you can go sit on a couch. It's just amazing some of the things that are being created today. Recently, if you've ever heard of the system called Discord, so Discord, they have the ability to play a game with a whole bunch of people in it together, and you can sit there and talk. And being a horse person, this really struck me interesting because a friend of mine, his whole company, they get onto this game where it's basically a gunslinger game, and it's back in the wild west, and they ride around on horseback or they sit at campfires and they talk and they have their conversations around a campfire. I mean, it's just the things that people are coming up with are just amazing. We have something here from Gil. Let's see. I think that we will see more focus on supply chains and hardening supply chains to be able to handle change and disruptions. That's absolutely true. Going into this pandemic, I was working with a security integrator. And a lot of the security devices, the cameras, the sensors, a lot of that was coming from overseas, whether it be from Sweden or China or Japan. They didn't do a whole lot of business with Chinese, equipment because of the fact that where it was coming from, and they were a little concerned about it, and they worked with the government. So what we found was the supply chain, the ability to get those supplies was definitely being challenged. So I definitely agree with you, Gil, that is going to be a problem, and organizations are really going to have to understand how to partner and how to get ahead of when something like this happens again. What's their plan to position themselves so that they can get the stuff that they need early? I remember that we were calling all of our suppliers. We knew what our customers wanted. So we were out there calling all of our suppliers and pre-ordering and asking for extended terms. So instead of getting the normal 60 or 90-day terms, bumping that up to 120, even close to 365-day terms on retail that we were buying. So and they were agreeing to that because they wanted to get that stuff out of their warehouse. They wanted to get it in somebody else's warehouse, and they wanted to get the sales before everything dried up. Other questions and other comments?
Hey, John, Bob Ham here. So, before the pandemic, many of us were used to solving problems by, gathering either as close as we could to the work. And we'd have a facilitator and a team lead, and we had everything that we needed right there on the spot to work for some period of time to close a performance gap or to improve a process. How do you see that changing for those of us that'll be problem solvers in 2021 virtually? I can envision in my mind certain processes. This won't be an issue at all. Any above the shop floor administrative type processes, but maybe you could highlight how you think that's going to change in manufacturing, or maybe in a services environment in the next year.
So one of the big areas that really has been an impact is when the entire organization has gone into a virtual environment, and you have somebody that's trying to help them, and I had to do this with a couple of companies, try to help them develop remote processes. So I can't go to their house and sit and watch what they're doing. So how do you do that? And we ended up using devices like a phone. And can you record? We used some software to record activities that they were actually doing. Mm-hmm. So they could actually videotape themselves and show me what steps they were going to. There's also some new software out to remote in. Normally this would be used by like an IT person, but you can use remoting software into somebody's computer, and you can actually watch what they're doing and just take notes. You may not see them if you don't have a video camera on them, but at least you can see the activities that they're doing. In a lot of the manufacturing areas, they were considered essential. So a lot of that stuff didn't stop. Some of the problems were people didn't want to go to work because they had fear. So there was a lot of people that either quit their jobs, or there are situations where people were forced out of jobs. Not good leadership situations, trust me. But the process people were still able to go in there and witness what was going on. It just, you're socially distancing yourself, you're wearing a mask, those kind of things. But I think that where the work is getting done in the business, you're still going to see the change. The area is when it's all virtual, and you're trying to figure out how does all this, and how do 17 people who are all doing the same job the same improve their operations. One of the organizations that I had to help go to, and I was talking to Dr. Wan about this, go to work from home, was a contact center. They were a very small call center. They had very specific clients that they worked with. They were about 25 employees, and they had less than 20 that actually worked in the call center. And when this happened, they all worked in a building with desktops. They had a phone system that was set up for making their telephone calls. Everything was controlled. So suddenly they're not considered a mission essential resource, and they have to go work from home. They had no idea how to do that. But then when you get them all working from home, now you've got all these people. How do you monitor what they're doing? Because usually there would be a manager that would come by, and they would plug in, and they would listen in on the call, and they would be able to talk to them about it. So we had to create processes and ways for somebody who's sitting in their house to be able to get on a call with somebody else and watch them on a camera, just like you see me, so that they could talk to them about how they looked, their behavior, were they smiling when they talked, and listen to what they said. So that's where you're really going to see a challenge, is where we have this virtual labor.
Thanks, John.
Hey, Bob, this is Liz. If I could just add more content behind there, right? Seeing the challenges that we've had, and my team is very focused on moving processes or innovating automation has been that challenge. And those things that John has talked about is utilizing those tools. So, I know not all companies are moving forward with different technologies, but just like before we went on Office 365, we were utilizing Zoom for them to record their processes for us to evaluate and take a look at. And I think we're just going to have to take a step back and start assuming that role as a project manager, right? I'm not a project manager per se. I have the skill, but I think we need to start evolving that in our leadership process, because again, it's managing the whole scope, and it's going to be a lot more work, but it's being able to communicate that effectiveness across the organization, across those teams that you're collaborating with, depending on what scenario it is, to bring that back in to some type of solution. Having that round table, right? There's a lot of different products out there now that we're doing virtual, Zoom, the Office 365, all the softwares, right? They have all their pluses, and I would just sign up for those or see what licenses, because they have a lot of great features as far as recording, whiteboard sessions. But again, it's going to be that collaboration, setting those goals, but I think it's going to have to come up more from the leadership, because I think John hit up on that, critically, is that it was one level down a tier. And when the crisis hit, it was like, where was the plan? Right. And now we're looking and focusing on it and shifting the mindset. So I think we have to shift the mindset with them and to be able to support those end goals.
So that's a really great point. One of the things that you're seeing, I know you've seen this, is there has been a significant increase in automation of some of the simple processes that you deal with all the time. Signing up for a conference. I'm sure somebody here has actually done that this year. Well, these business owners, small business owners in a lot, but they're moving to this technology base where the sign-up system is completely automated. And I gave this presentation last year with CIP, actually in 2019 with CIP, on intelligent process automation. And some of the challenges that I've witnessed, the 5 paradigms that I overcame. But now what I'm seeing is this fire and forget mentality. They build it and then they go off and they do something else. I had a company that reached out to me to ask me if I would speak at some of their conferences that they were going to be doing this year in 2020. And they said, if you're interested, click on the calendar link and set up an appointment. So 30-minute appointment. Okay, I set it up. Then I get a message about 2 weeks later, an email, and it was somewhat automated, appeared to be. And it said, we see that you actually went out to look at the calendar link, but you didn't set up an appointment. Would you like to set up an appointment? Go out to the calendar link. And I replied to the email and said, we have a meeting. It's set for 20 December. I'm good. And I didn't get any response. And a week later, I get another email. We see that you went out and you looked at the calendar link and you haven't signed up. Would you like to sign up? Here's the calendar link. And I responded again and said, as I said in the last email, so obviously nobody was watching this. Well, finally, somebody replied to me and they said, they refer to it's on the diary. But I got a human. Then the day came and I got an automated message that said, as a reminder, you have a call today on December 20th at this, we look forward to talking to you. We will be calling you, which is exactly how it was set up. The time came and it didn't happen. No phone call. So I replied to that automated reply and basically said, hey, I was here. I was waiting for the call. Didn't get anything from you. Guy's name is Brian. No reply. So I kind of blew them off. I'm like, you know what? I'm not going to try. I'd like to speak in their conferences. Sure. I'm sure they'd like to get a lot of people to speak in their conferences. And I just can imagine the number of people that they're missing because of this. Then in early January, I get a phone call, or I get another message. And it was titled Deal Lost. And it was from somebody else in their company. And it said, we see that we had a conversation with you on the 20th, but we never did any business. And we'd like to know what it is that maybe we didn't, we didn't fulfill. Or I'm like, really? You got to be kidding me. So I replied to them and I said, listen, here, I'm a process guy. I broke it down for them. This is what happened. This is what happened. That was a waste of my effort because nobody replied to me. In the last week, and this is, I mean, I can't make this stuff up. In the last week, I've received 3 emails from them, 3, asking if I want to speak in their upcoming conferences. I'm like, you got to be kidding me. So this is what's happening. And I see this a lot now where people are automating the process. I even have some of my processes that are automated with these tools that we have out there. But if you don't watch the shop, when you automate this stuff, it's going to bite you in the butt. You got to be watching it.
John, we have a couple messages in the chat.
So let's see. Tommy Bush said customers are now demanding new channels for engaging with the business and ways in which they receive the service and product. Well, I would agree with that. I think customers have been moving to new channels for quite a long time. I can't stand when you can't get hold of somebody, especially when you have a major issue. I'm very active on LinkedIn. And I was on LinkedIn maybe 3 weeks ago, and I was working in the morning, putting in my daily post. So I'm always trying to share information and share value out on LinkedIn. And all of a sudden, LinkedIn app crashes. So it restarts. And when it restarts, it says you need to log in. And when I went to log in, it said your account has been restricted. I'm like, what? Okay, what did I do? So come to find out, I can't talk to anybody unless I actually get on my laptop. So I can't use my phone. I can't use the internet browser on my phone. I have to be on an actual computer. So a little bit later, get on my computer, find out, okay, you can send a message. So I send a message and I'm like, I don't know what's going on, but this happened. And basically the response was all automated. You have to give us a copy of your driver's license front and back to prove your identity. Okay. So I did that. And I received an email that said, here's your problem identification. Here's your code. You can look at it on the server to see what the status is. Well, if you can't log in, you can't look at it. So I had no idea what was going on. And for 2 days, I sat there not knowing what was going on, not having anybody to communicate with. And if finally somebody got with me, and what it was is many people, they put other things in their title where it says your name, your first and last name. Some people put their middle initial in there, and some people put in designations, some people put in titles, whatever it might be. If you're doing that, LinkedIn's going to shut you down because it violates their policies. I didn't know that, but it took 2 days and nobody bothered to tell me, hey, you're doing something wrong. Stop it, or we're going to shut you down. No, they just shut me down. And for 2 days, I had no idea what was happening. So I'm completely with you, Tommy, that this is a problem. We need better communication with our businesses. And those of us who have businesses or we advise businesses, we need to figure out ways that we can open up those communication channels in an omni environment where if one conversation starts here and it transitions to this channel, that conversation carries with it. And you don't have this person asking you for your name, social, date of birth, and all this other information and tell me what your problem is. And then this person asks the exact same stupid questions that person asked. And you might go through 3 or 4 of those things. That's just bad process right there. And I see that Gil actually 100% agreed with Tommy. Hopefully, Gil, you agree with me too. Any other comments, questions, thoughts about how things are going to change?
Hey, John, one thing I've been thinking is that during the pandemic, we see a lot of changes, and some of the changes we feel that it's probably temporary. But I mean, over time, I started seeing that some temporary changes are probably going to be permanent. And some things that we did not expect it's going to be changing, they might be changing. So at least on the education side, we see things like, remote teaching. Although we may be able to go back to classes, remote teaching will not go away. We will be doing remote teaching more and more in the future. So tentatively, we're trying to do something about, allowing students to do exams remotely. But a lot of tentative or temporary solutions, they are not too good. So we should be developing permanent solutions for, remote exams. So I guess on the business side, there's probably a lot of similar, situations there.
So it's what you're dealing with is customer behavior, Dr. Wan. The customers they're beginning to expect certain things. And in some cases, so like kids that had to go and take classes and take all their classes at home, but their parents are the ones that had to ensure that they were doing all their work because the teacher's not basically doing that. They're just, the presence online. And a lot of parents are starting to realize, they're like, really, is this what I'm getting out of my education? And you've seen a significant rise in homeschooling because of this. Because if I have to, as a parent, I have to take care of my kid and train them, what the heck am I sending them to school for? I'll do it my own way. I'm a little bit worried about that, but we have a good homeschooling program in the United States. So it definitely is possible. But you're going to see a demand for every college out there, every high school. They're going to have the ability to teach virtually. It's just going to become the way of the future. The thing that I'm most concerned about, and we talked about this before everybody got in here, is that we have a lot of kids, younger kids, that are living in isolation, especially in the states that are still shut down. They're living in isolation from all of the students that they would go to school with. And that has not been good for their emotional intelligence, for their mental well-being. It's just not a good environment. And you're starting to see some of the schools are opening, even though, we have teachers that are threatening to sue. We have unions that are suing. And it's just the reality of it. But the biggest problem is the students, they need some type of interaction that's not a flat screen. And some of the stories and some of the people, I don't have kids, so luckily I don't have to deal with that. But I know people on this call do have children, and you have one right next door that's taking class, yeah. And so, we have to really watch out for that generation and think about the impacts of that. So Tommy asked, how many businesses have you called since COVID struck, and the telephone wait times are off the chart? They should be listening in today. Absolutely. And one of those is anything that has to do with government. So that's the one thing that has killed me. Government, I was in the Air Force for 21 years. I worked for Booz Allen for 3. And I finally was like, I need to get away from working with the government because they just don't get it. But I had to get my driver's license in October. So I'm coming up on the period to get my driver's license, and I go online to do it, and they're like, oh, you have to set up an appointment. Now I'm probably about a month out from when I need my new driver's license, but I have to go in to actually get it done because I've had this driver's license for long enough where they need another picture. I'm no longer the young stud that I used to be. And so I'm looking at this screen and it says, you have to set up an appointment. The next available appointment was 2.5 months later. 2.5 months. I'm like, I'm not going to have a driver's license. But they had a waiver, which was good for 2 months past it. So if I missed that appointment, I was going to be screwed. But I've noticed that trying to actually call anybody in government, and these are places that they were always considered mission essential, I can't get hold of anybody. And it's just amazing. And I know that they're socially distancing, and that's why they have the appointments, and they can only have so many people in the building at a time. I had to check my temperature and ask me a bunch of questions before I could even walk through the door. I get it. But that's the environment that, it's like the customer queue is just growing in everything. Think about when you go to a restaurant today and they're at 50%, and everybody wants to get out on a Friday and eat, and the restaurant is packed, and you can't just stand there because you got to socially distance from the 30 people that are waiting to get in to the 50% of seats that are available in the building. So that's kind of the reality of where we're dealing with, and you got to figure out ways around it.
Well, John, you're right. They do. The government has no competition. So you have to wonder, I don't mean that in a bad way. I'm like you, I spend a lot of time in the government. And so when government entities are not able to meet the customer's expectation, they have no place to go to get more resources or more money, because that budget is already passed to them by the Congress of the United States, and the manpower is already. So, however, that absolutely should not be an excuse. And I think this is where your thoughts on leadership, come in. Government is full of great people trying to do great things, but I'm not certain that innovation is always at the top of the list. But if they had to compete like a corporation did, like a business did, then I just wonder if the outcome might not be just a little bit different than you just described. And and you name it, my wife's been waiting for months for an appointment to get a driver's license. Unfortunately, I'm a Medicare guy. And so, I'm waiting, days for things that I need for Medicare and coming up on Social Security. I'm not complaining. I'm just saying, I think they're good people trying to make bad processes work each and every day. And it drives a lot of them nuts, because I don't think that they don't have any competition. So why innovate? Why improve? I guess I'll just throw that out there. I'm not sure I'm right on any of that, other than it's just what I've observed.
I just be honest with you. This is one of the reasons why I just don't like working with the government anymore, because of that kind of behavior. It's like, well, whatever. It is what it is. I mean, we saw this with unemployment, nearly 40 million people on unemployment. You imagine the strain in the United States on the unemployment system. People couldn't get through. Systems were crashing. When they announced, my mom wanted to get her vaccination. So she's in her early 80s, and she wants to get the vaccination. She lives in a 55 and older independent living facility. And they came out with the vaccination. They announced it, going to be down at the downtown at the whatchamacallit center. Can't remember the name of it, but where the Spurs play. And so she's going to call in. So the time comes, she calls in, busy. 6 minutes later, she was calling the entire time, busy, call back, busy, call back. In 6 minutes, they had sold out. Everything had been issued. And luckily, she just got her first vaccination on Wednesday of last week. So, but she got it through the place that she's actually living. They set that up. But this is, when I talk about the scaling and some of these, think about HEB. Like HEB was trying to manage not only keeping everything super clean. I remember when all this started happening and I walked into HEB and they had pulled off entire shelves of stuff. And my wife actually walked up and she asked, what the heck's going on here? And he said, we're doing a deep cleaning. And now they do deep cleanings on a regular basis. And think about the run on everything, not just toilet paper, but water and canned goods and bread. And it was like walking through, some third world country going into HEB. And they're trying to keep up with that because they had the materials, they had all the stuff to put on the shelves. They just couldn't get it there fast enough. And I actually worked with some of the people in HEB through the warehousing system and the supply chain to just be able to get that stuff out to them quickly enough. Because the minute it hit the store, it was gone. That's the reason why they were letting seniors in early, one, to protect them, but also because they could be able to get access to stuff that was just disappearing before anybody even walked in the store.
Hey, John, a lot of interesting discussions. We are 1 minute after 4 o'clock. I can have the meeting room open for a little while, but I think officially we can stop the presentation now. And thank you again for always bringing interesting topic to the group. And I really look forward to having you back again soon.
Well, it was a pleasure to be back, and it'd be great when we start meeting face to face again. But this obviously, both Jerry and I, this was our passion. We stood this thing up in his conference room of the office he was working out of, and when we met, we were at Stoneworks at our lunch meeting. I remember that first meeting when you walked up to me and said, "Can we come back?" So, and a year later, you guys took this program over, and I just think it's great that we have this free program for anybody that's in the improvement, line of work, whether it be strategy, process, change. It doesn't matter what it is. If you're improving stuff for businesses, this is the place for you to be able to meet people and talk about really important topics.
Thank you very much, John. And thanks for everybody who's joining today. And I'm going to post the video on our LinkedIn group so more people can watch it. Thank you for joining.